Welcome to the Story Lab. We hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. Jack Wilson stood at the bedroom doorway, watching his wife Megan pack her suitcase with meticulous care. At 35, the high school physics teacher still found himself marveling at Megan's beauty, her auburn hair catching the morning light, her green eyes sparkling with excitement. After 10 years of marriage, she could still make his heart skip a beat. "Are you sure you have everything you need for the conference?" Jack asked, leaning against the doorframe. Megan looked up from her packing, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I think so. 5 days in Chicago. I want to be prepared for anything." Jack nodded, his eyes drawn to the lingerie Megan was carefully folding and tucking into her suitcase. He recognized the delicate lace as part of the set he'd given her for their anniversary just last month. A warmth spread through his chest at the thought that she wanted to wear it, even on a business trip. "Taking the special occasion stuff, I see," he commented with a grin. Megan's cheeks flushed slightly. "Well, you never know. Might have a fancy dinner or something." As she continued packing, Jack couldn't help but notice how much effort Megan was putting into her appearance. She'd spent an extra 20 minutes on her makeup that morning, carefully applying eyeshadow and mascara she usually reserved for date nights. Her hair was styled in loose waves, a far cry from her usual messy bun for work. "You're going all out for this conference," Jack observed. "Must be some important people there." Megan shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Just want to make a good impression, that's all." Jack watched as she spritzed herself with expensive perfume he'd included with her anniversary lingerie. The familiar scent of jasmine and vanilla filled the air, stirring memories of intimate moments shared between them. As Megan zipped up her suitcase, Jack felt a twinge of something he couldn't quite name. Unease? Suspicion? He quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was Megan, his wife, his best friend, the woman he trusted above all others. "All set?" he asked, forcing a smile. Megan nodded, wheeling her suitcase to the door. "I think so. I'll call you every night, I promise." She leaned in, pressing her lips to his in a lingering kiss that left Jack slightly breathless. Her fingers trailed along his jaw as she pulled away. "I'll miss you," she murmured. "I'll miss you too," Jack replied. "Have a great time. Don't forget to bring me back a souvenir." Megan laughed, the sound light and musical. "Of course. Love you. Love you too," Jack called as she headed down the stairs. He watched from the window as Megan loaded her suitcase into her car and drove away, waving as she turned the corner out of sight. The house felt strangely empty without her presence. Shaking off the melancholy, Jack headed to the kitchen to make some coffee before grading papers. He had just settled at the dining room table with a stack of physics exams when his phone buzzed with an incoming text. Expecting it to be Megan letting him know she'd arrived safely at the airport, Jack was surprised to see an unknown number on the screen. His brow furrowed as he read the cryptic message. "Your wife isn't who you think she is. Check the guest list for the Palmer Hotel." Jack stared at the text, reading it over and over. A chill ran down his spine despite the warm spring day. Who would send something like this? And why? His first instinct was to delete it and forget he'd ever seen it. This had to be some kind of prank or scam. But a nagging doubt took root in the back of his mind, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there was something to this. Jack set his phone down, trying to focus on grading. But the words of the text kept floating through his thoughts, impossible to ignore. After reading the same question 3 times without absorbing it, he pushed the exams aside with a frustrated sigh. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself. "I trust Megan completely." But even as he said the words, Jack found himself reaching for his laptop. It wouldn't hurt to just check, right? Then he could put this whole thing to rest and get back to work with a clear conscience. He pulled up the website for the Palmer Hotel in Chicago, scrolling through the information about their conference facilities. There was a form to check event registrations, which Jack filled out with slightly trembling fingers. Conference name, Chicago Educators Summit. Attendee, Megan Wilson. He hit submit and waited, heart pounding. When the results loaded, Jack felt like the air had been sucked from his lungs. "No attendees found matching your search." "That can't be right," Jack said aloud, as if speaking the words could make them true. He tried again, checking for misspellings. Still nothing. With growing unease, Jack pulled up their shared digital calendar on his phone. He scrolled to the current week, seeing Megan's conference clearly marked for the next 5 days. But there was something else, an event he didn't recognize, hidden under the conference listing. A&M's special project, Jack read, his stomach twisting into knots. The event was scheduled for the exact dates of the supposed conference. A&M. The initials tugged at Jack's memory. Suddenly, it clicked. Adam Reeves, the new PE teacher Megan, had been spending a lot of time with lately. They were collaborating on some kind of cross-curricular fitness and art program for the school. Jack leaned back in his chair, mind racing. He thought back over the past few months, small details he dismissed suddenly taking on new significance. Megan staying late at school several nights a week, claiming she was grading projects. The new clothes she'd bought recently, form-fitting dresses and blouses Jack had admired but found a bit out of character for his usually casual wife. The way she'd become more protective of her phone, angling the screen away when texting. "No," Jack said firmly, shaking his head. "I'm letting my imagination run wild. There has to be a reasonable explanation for all of this." But doubt had taken hold, spreading tendrils of suspicion through his mind. Almost against his will, Jack found himself walking to Megan's home office. He told himself he was just looking for the conference itinerary. Surely she'd left a copy somewhere. He rifled through the papers on her desk, finding nothing but student artwork and lesson plans. Opening drawers yielded similar results. Jack was about to give up when he noticed a thick art textbook on the bookshelf, a scrap of paper sticking out slightly. Heart pounding, he pulled the book from the shelf. A folded note fluttered to the floor as he opened it. With trembling hands, Jack unfolded the paper, immediately recognizing Adam's messy scrawl. "Can't wait for our special getaway. You're my muse and my passion." The words blurred as tears filled Jack's eyes. He sank to the floor, clutching the damning note as his world crumbled around him. How could Megan do this? 10 years of marriage, of building a life together, and she'd thrown it all away for what? A fling with a handsome new teacher. Jack wasn't sure how long he sat there, overwhelmed by shock and grief. Eventually, the initial tidal wave of emotion receded enough for him to think somewhat rationally again. He needed more information before confronting Megan. He needed to be absolutely certain. Wiping his eyes, Jack returned to his laptop. He pulled up Adam's social media profiles, scrolling through recent posts. His heart sank as he saw a status update from just yesterday. Heading out for a rejuvenating beach retreat. Time to recharge and find new inspiration. Hashtag Oceana Resort. The Oceana was a luxury hotel about 3 hours' drive from their small town. Jack had always wanted to take Megan there for a romantic weekend, but they'd never quite been able to afford it on teachers' salaries. Apparently, Adam had deeper pockets. Or perhaps they were splitting the cost of their illicit rendezvous. A quick search showed Jack that Adam's wife, Emily, had posted about visiting her sick mother out of state for the week. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Jack's hand shook as he picked up his phone. He needed help, someone to talk him through this nightmare and help him decide what to do next. Without conscious thought, he found himself dialing a familiar number. "Jack? What's up?" Sarah Chen's voice was warm and concerned. His former student-turned-close friend, Sarah had a gift for reading people. She'd know something was wrong just from his tone. "Sarah, I need your help," Jack managed, his voice breaking. "Can you come over?" There was only a moment's hesitation before Sarah replied. "Of course. I'll be there in 10 minutes." True to her word, Sarah arrived shortly after, letting herself in with the spare key Jack had given her years ago. She found him sitting at the dining room table, staring blankly at the scattered evidence of Megan's betrayal. Sarah took in the scene quickly, her investigator's mind piecing together the situation. She sat down across from Jack, reaching out to squeeze his hand gently. "Tell me everything," she said softly. And so Jack did, his voice hollow as he recounted the events of the morning. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When Jack finished speaking, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Jack, I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you something. I've suspected this was going on for weeks now." Jack's head snapped up, shock and hurt flashing across his face. "What? Why didn't you say anything?" Sarah held up her hands placatingly. "I wasn't sure, Jack. I saw Megan and Adam in what looked like an intimate conversation at a local cafe a while back. But I told myself I was reading too much into it. They work together, after all. I didn't want to cause problems in your marriage over what might have been nothing." Jack nodded slowly, the hurt fading from his eyes. He knew Sarah would never intentionally keep something like this from him without good reason. "So what do we do now?" he asked, feeling lost. Sarah's eyes took on a determined glint. Now we confirm it beyond any doubt. I have some resources through work that can help us track Megan's phone location. If she's really at this Oceana resort with Adam, we'll know for sure. Jack hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of invading Megan's privacy so blatantly. But the memory of her lies steeled his resolve. He nodded for Sarah to proceed. It took only a few minutes for Sarah to pull up the information on her tablet. She turned the screen so Jack could see the blinking dot clearly marking Megan's location at the Oceana resort. What now? Jack asked, his voice hollow. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Now we confront them. But you shouldn't do this alone, Jack. Let me come with you for support and safety. Jack started to protest, but Sarah cut him off. I'm not taking no for an answer on this. You're in no state to drive anyway. We'll book a room under my name so they don't see you coming. Then you can decide exactly how you want to handle the confrontation. As Sarah made the arrangements, Jack felt a strange calm settle over him. The initial shock and pain were still there, but muted now beneath the steely determination. Megan and Adam thought they could make a fool of him. He would show them just how wrong they were. I know how I want to handle this, Jack said as Sarah ended the call with the resort. She raised an eyebrow questioningly. My way, Jack replied, a hint of his old confidence returning. And I'm going to need your help setting something up before we go. Sarah nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Whatever you need, Jack. Let's make them regret ever betraying you. As they gathered what they needed and headed out to Sarah's car, Jack felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. Anger, hurt, and betrayal warred with a grim satisfaction at the plan taking shape in his mind. One thing was certain, by the time this confrontation was over, Megan and Adam would wish they'd never even considered their little special getaway. Before leaving, Jack secretly set up a live stream link to the school's social media account on his phone, planning ahead for the confrontation to come. He wasn't sure yet how he would use it, but he wanted to be prepared for any possibility. As they drove towards the Oceana resort, Jack's mind raced with possibilities. How would Megan react when she saw him? What excuses would she try to make? And most importantly, how would he ensure that she and Adam faced the full consequences of their actions? The answers to these questions lay ahead, at the luxurious beachside resort where his wife thought she was safe from discovery. Jack's jaw clenched as he stared out the window, watching the scenery blur by. Soon, very soon, he would have his answers, and his revenge. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Jack and Sarah pulled into the elegant circular driveway of the Oceana resort. The sprawling beachfront property exuded luxury, with its pristine white facade and meticulously manicured gardens. Under different circumstances, Jack might have marveled at the beauty of the place. Now, it only served as a painful reminder of Megan's betrayal. Sarah squeezed Jack's arm reassuringly as they stepped out of the car. Remember, she whispered, we're just a normal couple here for a relaxing weekend. No need to draw attention to ourselves. Jack nodded, forcing a pleasant expression onto his face. He'd had plenty of practice hiding his true feelings over the past 24 hours. What was one more deception in a sea of lies? As they approached the reception desk, Sarah effortlessly slipped into her role. She laughed and flirted with the concierge, spinning a tale of a much-needed romantic getaway. Jack played along, his arm around Sarah's waist, trying to ignore the twisting in his gut. And here are your key cards, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, the concierge said with a polite smile. You're in room 712. I hope you enjoy your stay with us. Thank you so much, Sarah replied warmly. I'm sure we will. As they made their way to the elevator, Jack's heart began to race. They were so close now. Just a few more minutes, and he would be face to face with Megan and her lover. He took a deep breath, trying to center himself. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. You got this, Jack. I'm right here with you. The elevator dinged, and they stepped out onto the 7th floor. The plush carpet muffled their footsteps as they made their way down the hallway. Jack's eyes darted from door to door, searching for room 714, where he knew Megan and Adam were staying. As they approached their own room, Jack froze. Voices drifted from the next room over voices he recognized all too well. Oh, Adam, Megan's breathy laugh sent daggers through Jack's heart. Tonight is going to be our most passionate yet. I can't wait to show you what I brought. I bet it's that little red number, Adam's deep voice replied. The one that drives me wild. God, Megan, you're insatiable. Only for you, baby, Megan purred. Poor Jack has no idea what he's missing out on. Sometimes I can't believe how oblivious he is. White-hot rage flooded through Jack at those words. How dare they mock him like this? His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he fought the urge to burst into their room right then and there. Sarah placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Stick to the plan," she whispered. "We've got them dead to rights now." Jack nodded jerkily, allowing Sarah to guide him into their room. He paced back and forth as Sarah quickly set up her recording equipment, positioning a small camera to capture the hallway and the door to Megan and Adam's room. "Okay," Sarah said, double-checking the angle. "We're all set. How do you want to play this?" Jack took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I want to knock on their door. When Megan answers, I want you to start recording. Can you do it on your phone so it's not obvious?" Sarah nodded, pulling out her smartphone. "Consider it done. Are you ready for this?" "As I'll ever be," Jack replied grimly. They stepped out into the hallway, Sarah positioning herself slightly behind Jack with her phone held casually at her side. Jack raised his hand and knocked firmly on the door to room 714. There was a moment of muffled confusion from inside, then footsteps approaching. Jack steeled himself as the door swung open. Megan stood there in a silky robe, her hair tousled and cheeks flushed. Her eyes widened in shock as she registered Jack's presence. "Jack," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Surprise, darling," Jack said, his voice preternaturally calm. "I thought I'd join you on this teacher's conference." Megan's face drained of color. Behind her, Adam appeared in the doorway, equally stunned. "Jack, I can explain," Megan began, but Jack cut her off with a raised hand. "Oh, I'm sure you can," he said coolly. "I'm very interested to hear how you explain being here with Adam when you're supposed to be at a conference in Chicago." Megan and Adam exchanged panicked glances, clearly trying to get their story straight. Jack almost laughed at how quickly their lies fell apart. "It's not what it looks like," Adam tried, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really?" Jack arched an eyebrow. "Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with a coworker. Please enlighten me as to what's really going on here." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, please, can we talk about this privately?" "Why?" Jack asked, his tone deceptively mild. "You didn't seem too concerned about privacy when you were mocking me a few minutes ago." "What was it you said?" "That I'm oblivious to what I'm missing out on." Megan blanched, realizing they'd been overheard. Adam stepped forward, attempting to look authoritative despite being clad only in boxer shorts. "Look, Jack, this is a private matter between—" "A private matter?" Jack interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I think you lost the right to privacy when you decided to sleep with my wife." People were starting to peer out of their rooms, drawn by the commotion. Sarah stepped forward, placing a calming hand on Jack's arm. "Maybe we should take this inside," she suggested quietly. Jack nodded, pushing past Megan and Adam into their room. Sarah followed, closing the door behind them. "Who's she?" Megan demanded, her shock giving way to indignation. "This is Sarah," Jack replied calmly. "My friend and witness to your infidelity." "Witness?" Adam sputtered. "What the hell are you playing at, Wilson?" Jack ignored him, turning to his suitcase. He unzipped it calmly and began removing clothes, laying them neatly on the bed. "What are you doing?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. "Unpacking," Jack replied matter-of-factly. "I've booked the adjoining room for the week. I hope you don't mind if I join your little getaway." "You can't do that," Adam protested. "This is our room." Jack fixed him with a steely gaze. "Actually, I can. This room is registered under my name and paid for with my credit card. You're welcome to leave if you're uncomfortable." Megan and Adam exchanged helpless glances, their romantic retreat crumbling around them. "Jack, please," Megan pleaded. "Let's just talk about this. We can work it out." "Oh, we'll talk," Jack assured her. "We have all week to discuss how you betrayed our marriage and made a mockery of our vows. But right now, I'm tired from the drive. I think I'll turn in early." With that, Jack calmly walked to the adjoining door, unlocked it, and disappeared into his own room, leaving Megan and Adam standing in stunned silence. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the cheerful sunshine a stark contrast to the tension simmering in rooms 712 and 714. Jack had barely slept, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He'd spent most of the night coordinating with Sarah, setting up the next phase of their confrontation. At precisely 9 a.m., Jack knocked on the adjoining door. When there was no answer, he used his keycard to enter. Megan and Adam were huddled together on the bed, looking like they hadn't slept much either. They jumped when Jack entered, followed closely by Sarah. "Good morning," Jack said pleasantly. "I hope you slept well. We have a busy day ahead of us." "What are you talking about?" Adam demanded, his bravado from the previous night noticeably diminished. Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We want to have a little chat with Emily. I think she deserves to know what's been going on, don't you?" The color drained from Adam's face. "Emily? My wife? You can't." "I can, and I will," Jack interrupted. "In fact, I've already arranged it. She'll be video calling in about." He checked his watch. 5 minutes. Megan burst into tears. "Jack, please don't do this. We can work this out between us. There's no need to involve anyone else." "You involved Emily the moment you decided to sleep with her husband," Jack replied coldly. "She has a right to know." The next 5 minutes passed in tense silence. Megan and Adam whispered furiously to each other, trying to come up with a plan, while Jack calmly set up Sarah's laptop for the video call. At 9:05 on the dot, the laptop chimed with an incoming call. Jack answered, and Emily's confused face filled the screen. "Jack," she said, peering at the camera. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Hello, Emily," Jack replied gently. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news to share with you. Adam and Megan are here with me." He turned the laptop so Emily could see the guilty couple huddled on the bed. Her confusion quickly turned to shock, then anguish as understanding dawned. "Adam," she whispered. What are you doing there? You said you were at a training seminar." Adam opened his mouth, but no words came out. Megan buried her face in her hands, unable to meet Emily's gaze. With as much compassion as he could muster, Jack explained the situation. He told Emily about the affair, about the deception, about the teacher's conference that was really a romantic getaway. Emily listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. When Jack finished, she turned her attention to Adam. "How could you?" she choked out. "After everything we've been through. I trusted you." Adam stammered out weak excuses and apologies, but Emily cut him off. I can't deal with this right now," she said, her voice breaking. "I need time to think. Adam, don't bother coming home. I'll have your things packed and left with your brother." With that, she ended the call, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Jack closed the laptop and turned to Megan and Adam. "I hope you're both proud of yourselves," he said quietly. "You've not only destroyed our marriages, but you've hurt innocent people in the process." Megan looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Jack, please," she begged. "Don't tell anyone at the school. We'll lose our jobs. Our reputations will be ruined." Adam nodded frantically. "We'll do anything. Just please don't expose us at work." Jack appeared to consider this for a moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I won't say anything at the school. But in return, I want you both to sign confession statements admitting to the affair. It's only fair that I have some insurance." Relieved at this apparent reprieve, Megan and Adam quickly agreed. Sarah produced the pre-prepared statements, and they signed without hesitation. "Thank you, Jack," Megan said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I know we can work this out somehow." Jack didn't respond. He simply collected the signed statements and left the room, Sarah following close behind. That evening, Jack suggested they all have dinner together in the resort's main restaurant. Megan and Adam were hesitant, but Jack insisted it would be a good opportunity to discuss how they would move forward. The restaurant was crowded, filled with chattering vacationers enjoying their meals. Jack, Megan, Adam, and Sarah were seated at a table near the center of the room, an uncomfortable silence hanging over them. As the waiter took their drink orders, Jack casually pulled out his phone. "You don't mind if I check my messages, do you?" he asked innocently. "I want to make sure everything's okay back home." Megan and Adam shook their heads, relief evident on their faces at the break in tension. Jack tapped at his phone for a moment, then set it on the table, screen up. What Megan and Adam didn't realize was that Jack had just activated the live stream to the school's social media account. The phone's camera was now broadcasting their conversation to hundreds of students, parents, and faculty members. "So," Jack said, his voice carrying clearly in the busy restaurant, "let's talk about this affair of yours. How long has it been going on?" Megan nearly choked on her water. "Jack," she hissed. "Not here." "Why not?" Jack asked, his voice still calm but loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "I think it's time we got everything out in the open, don't you?" Adam leaned forward, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Wilson, I'm warning you." "Warning me?" Jack interrupted. That's rich, coming from the man who's been sleeping with my wife. Tell me, Adam, how does it feel to betray not only your own wife, but also a colleague? People at nearby tables were openly staring now. Megan buried her face in her hands, while Adam looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Please, Jack, Megan begged. We said we were sorry. We promised we'd end it. What more do you want from us? Jack leaned back in his chair, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I want the truth, Megan. I want you to admit right here and now exactly what you've done. Fine. Megan snapped, tears streaming down her face. Yes, we had an affair. Yes, we lied about the conference to come here together. Are you happy now? Ecstatic, Jack replied dryly. And what about you, Adam? Anything you'd like to add? Adam glared at Jack, his jaw clenched. This is blackmail, he growled. No, Jack corrected him. This is consequences. You both made choices, and now you're facing the results of those choices. As Jack spoke, Megan's phone began to buzz incessantly. She pulled it out, her face paling as she saw the flood of notifications. Oh my God, she whispered. Jack, what have you done? Jack picked up his own phone, ending the live stream with a tap. I've done exactly what I said I would do, he replied calmly. I didn't tell anyone at the school about your affair. They saw it for themselves. The reality of the situation crashed down on Megan and Adam. Their phones were blowing up with messages from colleagues, students, and parents. The live stream had gone viral within minutes, spreading through the school community like wildfire. You promised, Adam sputtered, his face a mask of fury and fear. I promised I wouldn't say anything, Jack corrected him. And I didn't. You did all the talking yourselves. Megan and Adam scrambled to do damage control, frantically typing out messages and making calls. But the damage was done. Their affair, their lies, their betrayal, it was all out in the open now. Jack calmly sipped his water, watching as their world crumbled around them. Sarah placed a hand on his arm, a silent show of support. I think I've lost my appetite, Jack said, standing up. Enjoy your meal. Oh, and don't worry about the bill. It's on me. Consider it a parting gift for a decade of marriage. With that, Jack and Sarah left the restaurant, leaving Megan and Adam to face the consequences of their actions. The next morning, the atmosphere in the resort was thick with tension. News of the scandal had spread beyond the school, reaching the local community back home. Megan and Adam were pariahs, avoiding eye contact with other guests and flinching at every ping from their phones. Jack, on the other hand, was calm and collected. He'd spent the night fielding calls and messages from concerned friends and colleagues, explaining his side of the story with dignity and restraint. As he and Sarah enjoyed breakfast on her balcony, Megan approached, her eyes red and swollen from crying. How could you do this to me? She demanded, her voice hoarse. You've ruined everything. Jack set down his coffee cup, meeting Megan's gaze steadily. I didn't ruin anything, Megan. You did that all on your own when you decided to betray our marriage. Megan's face contorted with a mix of anger and desperation. You don't understand. I was unhappy. Adam made me feel alive again. You were always so focused on your work, your students. Don't you dare try to blame this on me, Jack interrupted, his calm demeanor cracking slightly. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me. We could have worked on our marriage. Instead, you chose to lie, to cheat, to make a fool of me. Sarah stood up, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder. I think I'll give you two some privacy, she said softly, retreating into the room. Megan's eyes followed Sarah, a spark of jealousy igniting. Is that why you did this? You're sleeping with her, aren't you? This is all just revenge. Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really don't get it, do you? Sarah is my friend. She's been here to support me through this nightmare you've created. Unlike you, some people actually understand the concept of loyalty. Megan's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. What happens now, Jack? What are we going to do? We. Jack repeated, raising an eyebrow. There is no we anymore, Megan. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. As if on cue, Adam appeared behind Megan, his face haggard. We need to talk, he said urgently. The school board is calling an emergency meeting next week. They want us all there to explain what happened. Megan turned to Jack, her eyes pleading. Jack, please. You have to help us. If we lose our jobs. Jack stood up, his expression hardening. I don't have to do anything. You both made your beds. Now you can lie in them. Although he added with a hint of sarcasm, I suppose you've already been doing plenty of that. Adam's face flushed with anger. He took a step towards Jack, fists clenched. You smug bastard. You think you're so much better than us. Jack didn't flinch. I didn't cheat on my spouse. I didn't lie to everyone I know. So yes, Adam, I do think I'm better than you. And if you're smart, you'll back off right now. Something in Jack's tone made Adam hesitate. The physical intimidation that might have worked before seemed to bounce off Jack's newfound confidence. This isn't over, Adam growled, turning to leave. Oh, I think it is, Jack called after him. By the way, I've already spoken to my lawyer. He'll be contacting both of you about the divorce proceedings. Megan gasped. Divorce? No. We can work this out. Please, just give me another chance. Jack shook his head. There are no more chances, Megan. You threw away 10 years of marriage for a fling. I deserve better than that. I deserve someone I can trust. Tears streaming down her face, Megan made one last attempt. What about all our friends? Our colleagues? They'll take sides. It'll be so messy. I'm not worried, Jack replied calmly. I've been nothing but honest and transparent throughout this whole ordeal. I think you'll find that honesty goes a long way. As if to prove his point, Jack's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, a small smile tugging at his lips. That was Karen from the PTA, he said. She's organizing a support rally for me. Apparently, quite a few parents appreciate how I've handled the situation. They're calling me a role model for integrity. Megan's face crumpled. This was all going so wrong. She had never imagined her affair would blow up like this. In her mind, she would have eventually ended things with Adam, and Jack would have been none the wiser. Now, her entire life was falling apart. I think you should go, Jack said quietly. Sarah and I have plans for the day, and I'm sure you and Adam have a lot to discuss. Defeated, Megan turned to leave. At the door, she paused, looking back at Jack with tear-filled eyes. I do love you, you know. I never meant to hurt you like this. Jack met her gaze, his expression a mixture of pain and resolve. If you loved me, Megan, you wouldn't have done this. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. It's choosing your partner every day, through good times and bad. You chose Adam. Now you get to live with that choice. As Megan left, her shoulders shaking with sobs, Sarah emerged from the room. She approached Jack, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? She asked softly. Jack took a deep breath, looking out over the beautiful ocean view that now seemed tainted by the events of the past few days. No, he admitted. But I will be. Sarah squeezed his hand supportively. You handled that incredibly well, Jack. I'm proud of you. Jack managed a small smile. Thanks, Sarah. I couldn't have done this without you. As they stood there, looking out at the horizon, Jack felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pain, certainly, and anger. But there was also a sense of freedom, of possibilities. For the first time since discovering Megan's betrayal, he allowed himself to think about the future. It wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult days ahead. The school board meeting, the divorce proceedings, the inevitable gossip and speculation. But Jack knew he would face it all with the same strength and integrity he'd shown here. Megan and Adam had made their choices. Now it was time for Jack to make his. And he chose to move forward, to rebuild his life on his own terms. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. A week had passed since the fateful confrontation at the Oceana Resort, but for the residents of Millbrook, it felt like an eternity. The small town of 15,000 was abuzz with gossip, whispered conversations in grocery store aisles, and heated debates over coffee at the local diner. The scandal involving two of Millbrook High's teachers had spread like wildfire, leaving no one untouched. At the center of it all was Jack Wilson, the wronged husband who had exposed his wife's affair in a dramatic live stream that had since become the stuff of local legend. As he drove to the emergency school board meeting, Jack couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of the past week. The parking lot of the Millbrook School District office was packed, a clear indication of the meeting's importance. Jack spotted Megan's car and felt a twinge in his chest, a mix of anger, hurt, and something else he couldn't quite name. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself for what was to come. Inside, the tension was palpable. The usually spacious boardroom felt cramped, with extra chairs brought in to accommodate the crowd. Jack nodded politely to a few familiar faces as he made his way to his seat. He caught sight of Megan and Adam, sitting as far apart as possible, both looking pale and drawn. The board president, a stern-faced woman named Eleanor Simmons, called the meeting to order. "We are here today," she began, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "to address the recent incident involving 3 of our staff members. We will hear from all parties involved before making our decision." Jack was called to speak first. As he stood, he felt all eyes on him. This was his moment, not for revenge, but for truth. "Members of the board, fellow educators, members of the community," Jack began, his voice steady and clear. "I stand before you today not as a victim, but as someone who believes in the power of education and the responsibility we have to our students." He went on to detail his decade of service to Millbrook High, pulling out commendations, thank you notes from students, and evidence of the various extracurricular programs he'd initiated or supported. "Teaching isn't just a job for me," Jack continued, his passion evident in every word. "It's a calling. Every day, I strive to inspire my students, to show them the wonders of science and the importance of integrity." As Jack spoke, he noticed several of his current and former students in the audience. They nodded encouragingly, some even wiping away tears. "I won't pretend that the events of the past week haven't been devastating on a personal level," Jack admitted, his voice catching slightly. "But I've always taught my students that character is revealed in how we handle adversity. I chose to face this situation with honesty and dignity, not for my sake, but for theirs." He gestured to the students present. "They're watching us. They're learning from us, not just in the classroom, but in how we conduct ourselves in all aspects of our lives." As Jack concluded his speech, a ripple of applause spread through the room. Eleanor Simmons had to call for order before inviting Megan to speak next. Megan approached the podium, her usual confidence noticeably absent. She glanced at Jack, then quickly looked away, unable to meet his steady gaze. I know what I did was wrong," Megan began, her voice barely above a whisper. The microphone squealed, causing her to flinch. She took a moment to compose herself before continuing. "I made a terrible mistake, but I'm an excellent teacher. My students love me, and my art program has brought recognition to the school. Surely my personal life shouldn't affect my professional standing." Her plea was met with stony silence. Jack could see the board members exchanging glances, their expressions unreadable. Adam was the last to speak. He approached the podium with a swagger that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "Look," he said, leaning into the microphone, "what happened between Megan and me was consensual. It was a mistake, sure, but it's not like we committed a crime. I've been nothing but an asset to this school since I arrived. The PE program has never been stronger." As Adam continued to downplay his role in the affair, Jack noticed Megan's expression darkening. It was clear that Adam's attempt to distance himself from the situation was not sitting well with her. After the 3 had spoken, Eleanor Simmons called for a brief recess while the board deliberated. The tension in the room was unbearable as everyone waited for the decision. When the board members returned, their faces were grim. Eleanor cleared her throat before addressing the room. "After careful consideration, the board has reached a decision," she announced. "Mr. Wilson, in light of your exemplary record and the professionalism you've displayed throughout this difficult situation, we see no reason to take any action against you. You will retain your position at Millbrook High." A smattering of applause broke out, quickly silenced by Eleanor's raised hand. As for Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Reeves, she continued, her tone noticeably cooler, "Your actions have brought disrepute to this institution and violated the trust placed in you as educators. You are both placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending further investigation. It is likely that you will be transferred to different districts once this matter is fully resolved." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Megan burst into tears, while Adam slammed his fist on the table in front of him. Jack, however, remained calm, accepting the decision with a quiet nod. As the meeting adjourned, Jack found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Parents patted him on the back, colleagues expressed their support, and students shared stories of how he had positively impacted their lives. One student, a shy girl named Emily, approached Jack with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice trembling, "I just wanted you to know that you're the reason I want to become a scientist. You showed me that I could do anything if I put my mind to it." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. This, he realized, was why he became a teacher in the first place. Not for recognition or accolades, but from moments like these. As he left the building, Jack noticed a group of parents huddled together, speaking animatedly. He caught snippets of their conversation, something about organizing a rally in his support. The news of the school board's decision spread quickly through Millbrook. Jack found himself at the center of a storm of public opinion, but unlike the scandalous whispers that had followed the initial revelation of the affair, the talk now was overwhelmingly positive. The local newspaper ran a feature on Jack, praising his dedication to education and his dignified handling of the scandal. The article painted him as a role model for the community, someone who had faced adversity with grace and integrity. A few days after the board meeting, Jack was surprised to find a crowd gathered outside Millbrook High as he arrived for work. Parents, students, and community members held signs with messages like, "We stand with Mr. Wilson," and "Integrity Matters." Karen Thompson, the PTA president, approached Jack with a warm smile. "We wanted to show you how much we appreciate you, Jack," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "You've taught our kids more than just physics. You've shown them what real character looks like." Jack was overwhelmed by the support. As he made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting words of encouragement, he caught sight of Megan watching from her car across the street. Their eyes met for a brief moment before she quickly drove away. The contrast between their situations couldn't have been starker. While Jack was being celebrated, Megan and Adam found themselves social pariahs. They were pointedly uninvited from community events, met with cold shoulders at the grocery store, and subject to not-so-subtle whispers wherever they went. Megan, in particular, seemed to be struggling with the fallout. Jack heard through the grapevine that she had attempted to volunteer at the local arts center, hoping to win back some community support. But her efforts were met with polite refusals and thinly veiled disdain. Adam, on the other hand, seemed to be handling the situation with less grace. There were rumors of him getting into a shouting match with a parent at the local coffee shop, and Jack had overheard some of his students discussing how Mr. Reeves had become snappish and irritable in his final days before the administrative leave took effect. As for Jack, he threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. He volunteered to coach the school's science team, a role he had always wanted to take on but never found the time for. Under his guidance, the team began to flourish. Late nights were spent in the lab, working with students on their projects. Jack found a sense of purpose in these hours, helping young minds explore the wonders of science. It was during one of these sessions that he received the news that would change everything. "Mr. Wilson," exclaimed Zoe, one of his brightest students, bursting into the lab one evening. "We did it. We qualified for the national championship." The room erupted in cheers. Jack felt a surge of pride as he looked at his team's beaming faces. This was the first time in the school's history that they had made it to the national level. As the excitement died down and the students began to pack up for the night, Jack found himself alone in the lab. He sat at his desk, a mix of emotions washing over him. Pride in his student's accomplishment, yes, but also a bittersweet realization that this chapter of his life was coming to an end. For weeks now, he had been contemplating a change. The offer had come out of the blue, a prestigious teaching position at a magnet school for science and technology in another state. At first, Jack had dismissed the idea. Millbrook was his home, his community. But as the days passed and the weight of recent events settled on him, the idea began to take root. The next day, Jack scheduled a meeting with Principal Rogers to discuss his decision. The older man listened intently as Jack explained his reasoning, nodding in understanding. "We'll be sorry to lose you, Jack," Rogers said, leaning back in his chair. "But I understand. Sometimes a fresh start is what we need. You've done great things here, and I have no doubt you'll continue to do so wherever you go." With the decision made, things moved quickly. Jack threw himself into preparing his students for the national championship while also making arrangements for his move. The news of his impending departure spread through the school and town, met with a mix of sadness and well wishes. 3 months after the fateful day at the Oceana Resort, Jack found himself sitting in his lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. The process had been surprisingly smooth. Megan, perhaps out of guilt or a desire to avoid further scandal, had agreed to Jack's terms without much fuss. As he walked out of the office, divorce papers in hand, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was really over. He was free to move on, to start his new life. The evening before his departure, Jack was packing the last of his belongings when the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find Megan standing there, looking small and vulnerable. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. "I need to get the last of my things." Jack nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. They moved around each other awkwardly, the familiarity of a decade together warring with the distance that had grown between them. As Megan gathered her belongings, she kept glancing at Jack, opening her mouth as if to speak, then thinking better of it. Finally, as she was about to leave, she turned to him. Jack, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance? Any at all? I've changed, I swear. I still love you. Jack looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. He saw the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago, the woman he had built a life with. But he also saw the woman who had lied to him, betrayed him, mocked him behind his back. Megan, he said softly, I'm sorry, but no. Trust, once broken, can't be repaired. At least not for me. Not in this case. Tears welled up in Megan's eyes, but she nodded, accepting his decision. As she turned to leave, Jack stopped her. Wait, he said, reaching for an envelope on a nearby table. I wrote this for you. I think it might help provide some closure. For both of us. Megan took the letter with trembling hands. Thank you, Jack, she whispered. For everything. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. As she walked away, Jack felt a chapter of his life truly close. He turned back to his packing, ready to face whatever came next. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Jack stood on his front porch, taking in the familiar sights of his neighborhood one last time. His car was packed, ready for the long drive to his new home. As he was about to leave, he heard a commotion down the street. To his surprise, he saw a crowd approaching, his students, led by the science team, along with several of his colleagues and community members. They gathered in front of his house, many holding signs wishing him well. The science team presented him with a scrapbook filled with photos and messages. Colleague after colleague stepped forward to share how Jack had inspired them or made a difference in their lives. As Jack looked out at the faces of the people he had lived and worked with for so long, he felt the swell of emotion. This was what teaching was all about, not just imparting knowledge, but touching lives, building connections, leaving a lasting impact. From the corner of his eye, Jack caught a glimpse of Megan watching from a distance. Their eyes met briefly, a world of unspoken words passing between them. Then she turned and walked away, and Jack refocused on the well-wishers before him. After many hugs, handshakes, and promises to keep in touch, Jack finally got into his car. As he drove away, watching Millbrook recede in his rearview mirror, he felt a mix of sadness and excitement for what lay ahead. Miles down the road, Jack allowed himself a moment to reflect. The past few months had been the most challenging of his life, but he had emerged stronger, more sure of himself and his values. He was leaving behind the familiar, but he was driving towards new opportunities, new challenges, and a chance to impact even more young lives. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever the future held, he was ready to face it head-on, with the same integrity and passion that had carried him through the storm. Meanwhile, back in Millbrook, Megan sat alone in her small apartment, surrounded by boxes of her belongings. She held the letter from Jack in her hands, reading it for what felt like the 100th time. Tears streamed down her face as she absorbed his words, kind but firm, explaining why he could never take her back and wishing her well in her future. She looked up at the photos on her wall, memories of happier times, of the life she had thrown away in a moment of weakness. As the reality of her situation truly sank in, Megan began to understand the full consequences of her actions. She had lost not just her husband, but her home, her job, her friends, and the respect of an entire community. As she sat there, surrounded by the remnants of her old life, Megan realized that her journey of redemption was only beginning. It would be a long, difficult road, but as she folded Jack's letter and placed it carefully in a drawer, she made a silent promise to herself to learn from this experience and become a better person. The sun set on Millbrook, casting long shadows across the town. In one car, a man drove toward a new future, filled with hope and possibility. In one small apartment, a woman faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the ground up. And in between, a community continued on, forever changed by the unexpected guest of infidelity that had shaken their quiet town to its core. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.